The Ten Commandments are always relevant.
Yeah, categorically disagree.
That's fine, that's what we're here for.
What happens when a Christian, an atheist, and a psychotherapist walk into a bar? It's no joke.
This whole discussion to me is proving to me that it's no longer relevant. I think society has progressed.
Humans are created in an image of God.
We're not.
It's the start of a real conversation.
You don't believe in anything.
I just don't believe in one more God than you do. Like,
3 ways of seeing the world, 1 bar, and all the questions that connect us. I'm Theo Johnson, and this is who's walking in my bar today. Hi, Sayo. So you identify as an atheist. Could you tell us what that means to you?
I do not believe that, God is responsible for life on Earth. I do not believe in creationism. I'm just not convinced of any of the quote-unquote evidence that is presented to prove the existence or facilitate my belief and conviction in a God.
Blessing. You're a therapist, right?
So I'm a psychotherapist, and I work primarily with trauma. And so with regards to faith, I always wait until my clients bring faith into the room. So I work with people of a variety of different faiths. I also work with people who've had religious trauma. And so a big part of my own personal belief and my own personal theology is framed from my experience with people and my clinical knowledge, but also my own personal walk, and someone who was raised in religion, but who has gone on a journey to unpack some of my beliefs and some of my own sort of worldview.
And Isaac.
Yes, so I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor. I discovered God at the age of 22. I was a new ager, depressed, addicted, and God encountered me. And that led me on a journey to becoming a pastor now. And so I pastor young people, and I help them to discover faith and discover their meaning of God in life.
We want to get into rules and life and also the commandments. Do you guys think the 10 commandments are still relevant for today?
Yes, I do. You have to understand the context in which the commandments were given. They were given to a new nation that didn't have any commandments before. And so God, the Creator, gave them some rules to govern behavior. And so rules like thou shalt not kill, honor your mother, don't steal, don't envy, was just a way of making sure this nation had guidelines to thrive together, but also a way of relating back to God. So I think it's relevant because it also translates to now. A lot of laws have been based on the 10 Commandments, and even the Western culture have been based on a Christian ethos. Maybe not so now, but the foundations were.
I disagree. I'm so sorry. Foundationally, the start of the 10 Commandments are about relationship with God. And I think the only way to really fulfill the whole of the commandments is to have that foundation with God. And I think a commandment like obey your father and mother, as a therapist, I work with people who have been obedient, but to very toxic or neglectful parents.
Yeah.
I do think the themes within the commandments are important. Yeah. I think society has progressed. I don't think we're in that same space of a nation being formed. In fact, we're such a combination of different nations and people that I don't know if those 10, as they are, should still be relevant.
So you're saying it's only relevant if you follow Christ?
As the 10, yes, I would say so. I think the themes of them are relevant for a lot of people, and different people's morality can still lead them to the conclusion of don't kill, don't cheat. However, I think if we're talking about these 10 specifically, not just people having a rule of life or morality, then I don't know if these 10 are relevant for anyone outside of a Judeo-Christian perspective. But I think within that context, it's relevant. I think for those who might be atheist or Muslim or Sikh, I don't know if that's the same 10 commandments they need to obey, because the commandments are also dependent on your relationship with the God you serve.
For me, it superimposes this idea that morality cannot be gotten outside of religiosity. I don't need to be commanded not to kill someone innocent before I know not to kill someone innocent. This idea that morality cannot be separated from religiosity when more evidence points to morality being something that isn't this fixed or linear, myopic and rigid framework as much as it is something that is socially influence and is also influenced by power dynamics as well. Morality and legality, for example, they are not mutually exclusive. They do not have a symbiotic relationship. Slavery was legal. Was it moral? When it comes to the 10 Commandments, it's so clearly, to me anyways, used as a way to control. It's very male-centered, it's very patriarchal. And so for me, as a young girl growing up reading and understanding the 10 Commandments, imagine my shock. There are many verses in the Bible that give you a loophole as to how to get away with enslaving, as to how to treat your slaves, as to how to treat your women as possessions. And so for me, a patriarchal religion that is founded on this doomsday ideology, that doesn't serve anyone but the person who is going to tell you that this is what you should believe.
Do you feel like they're made to control?
My perspective on God is different. The commandments were given to a people already that belong to God. So to say that it's controlling, it's not. It's a guideline for the people that were already his. And so it wasn't like he imposed it on everyone. Around the woman things, I've never read the Bible through the lens of a woman.
But that doesn't mean that you can't empathize. It doesn't. No. You don't need to be a woman to be able to.
I'm not saying that I don't empathize. I'm just saying that I can never speak for women, so I don't know the pain. I don't know the grapplings of it. So I'm not speaking from that point of view, but based on just reading the word as a pastor. When we look at God, obviously we relate to him as Father, but he's also, if you study the word, you also see that he has mother tendencies. He says to the children of Israel, like, would I forget you? Like once a mother nurses like a child, I won't forget you. So he's relating to himself, like, I care, I have mother tendency. We're both male and female, were created in the image of God. And so the image of God is reflected totally through male and female. Throughout, if you go into the New Testament, we see women being empowered even by Jesus throughout the different narratives. So my question to you there, without the commandments, without God, what do you propose? Because when I study history, when people are veered away, and we see even today, when people are veering away from God, nations become depraved. If that's the right word to use.
The idea that moving away from a theocracy causes depravity is just not founded in any real evidence.
So mention me a nation that without the foundation of Christianity or faith or that has thrived without some form of law.
There's a difference between religious law and actual law. In recent examples, Finland is not a religious country. Of course, they're religious people, but it's not religiously founded. And the levels of happiness, more secular countries, they report higher levels of satisfaction with the government. They report their higher qualities of life. Their advancements are a lot better as well. Whereas when you go to countries such as Nigeria, for example, I'm Nigerian, where there is a church every 5 steps, you see things like the poverty, you see the rampant mental illness that is that is everywhere, right? And obviously this is not in all of Nigeria, but in a lot of places where there is religiosity, more of a theocracy in how the state is run, and there's less separation between church and state. And so there is no causal link or correlation between the religiosity of a nation and the advancement of a nation. That's not to say that, it cannot happen, but it's not because of religiosity. It's because of the civilization and the society themselves.
This whole discussion to me is proving to me that it's no longer relevant. And I think even if we look at scripture, the Old Testament was in a completely different framework of faith than the New Testament. Like, Jesus expanded on some of those commandments. And so if Jesus was expanding on them, and that's for his time, how much more do we need to expand with our time, with things like technology, with things like all the human rights that we have in place for people? And Jesus was radical for his time, because arguably we could say the people in Jesus's time were following the commands. That wasn't their issue, right? Their issue was that they didn't have this revelation of the Messiah, but they were quite diligent. So they had an awareness of the commandments, but I don't know if that's the entirety of how people should live.
Blessing, what would you add or change to the commandments?
Oh gosh, that's such a difficult question. I don't know if I can honestly answer that, because for me, the way I view the commandments, and I think touching on what you said of like, they were God's people, which firstly, I think we need to question. I thought everyone was God's people, not just the Israelites, but hey, that's not today's discussion. But if we were to unpack them being God's people, so he put these rules in place for their protection, let's say that, I see that as house rules, you know, like God's a father, that's how the Christian faith paints him out to be. He's putting in house rules, and perhaps when you leave the house, you can change the house rules. And so for me, I almost would want to empower people to have a measured perspective on the rules that they want for their life. And I think that needs to be done in the context of community. But I don't know if I could honestly or authentically prescribe a one-size-fits-all, because I don't know if that's fair. Because even from a therapeutic perspective, if someone comes in and they're depressed, or someone comes in and they've experienced neglect, I'm not addressing it the same way. And so I couldn't morally or ethically say one version of my commandments fits all.
What is it about humans that need to follow a rule?
Oh, I would question if humans need to follow a rule. I think as humans, that's kind of just how we almost ground or regulate ourselves, is by finding our own version of rules or stability or grounding. And so I don't know if it's a need. I think it's a bit innate in us because of the craziness or unpredictability of our world. We're looking for things to ground us. And for some, that's God. For some, that's cigarettes. That's what grounds them. And so I think we're always looking for that simply because the world we exist in is a bit rubbish sometimes. And so we need things to help us.
Yeah, I think it's not that humans need rules and all these things, because that is then to say that we are incapable innately of being able to self-govern. And, you know, whenever I tell people that I'm an atheist, they always ask me, okay, so what do you believe in? I believe in the sovereignty of the individual. I believe in the right of the individual to self-govern within a communal context. We scaffold our understanding of not only ourselves, but our environment and the world around us. Humans innately are pattern-seeking, meaning-seeking creatures. We look at like numbers, for example, and people have now turned them into angel numbers. It's our desire for pattern recognition so that we understand what is happening in our environment.
Sayo, as an atheist, do you still subscribe to marriage?
Personally, for me, I don't care for marriage, but I will be there to bear witness to other people who, you know, subscribe to it and who hold it as important to themselves. For me, marriage as a ritual is what you make it, you know? All the different rituals that there are in religious ceremonies, etc. Rituals are made all out of people's desire to connect and for connectivity. And so that is something that, again, has predated religion. When people were dancing around fires, dance and movement and celebration, it's not an exclusively religious thing. And my stance is that all these things predate religion.
Do you feel like there would be someone who isn't religious who still wants to get married?
Oh yeah, 100%.
What would the reason for that be then?
Their desire to be married. I mean, people's desires for things exist outside of just one context, you know? Religion is one way in which people seek out the desire for marriage. It's the ritual of relationships within that religious context, you know? But for someone who doesn't follow that same journey to get to the end destination, it doesn't mean that their desire to get to that destination is any less valid. Marriage historically was for marrying kings and queens and princes and princesses to join nations for power. Marriage was done at the detriment of young girls, because young girls were being forced to marry, and not just were being forced, are being forced to marry. And so marriage is not this exclusively beautiful, lovely, always rooted in love thing. It's a contract, it's control to a lot of people.
So why would you still do it?
Because there's more than one reason to get to do something. Like, so I work with a lot of charities to raise awareness for sickle cell and the importance of blood donation. I don't do it because I want to go to heaven. I do it because I want to do it. I do it because it's something that is very personal to me. my desire for it is not invalidated by someone else's desire to do it for whatever reason it is they want to do it. And so for me, it's just about not invalidating different people's desires to get to the end goal if that is what they value.
I think when we talk about marriage and the different reasons people get married, because I've worked with enough people who've been divorced, both who are religious and who are irreligious. And so many people have different reasons as to why they're stepping into that sort of commitment. But what I would say is people need to use a lot more discernment when they are figuring out whether they should get married. And I think sometimes when it comes to rituals that are backed by religion, there is this push because it seems like you're a better person or a better Christian
it's very self-righteous.
if you've achieved, if you've achieved marriage or you've got a partner. Even sometimes I've walked into churches and people are introduced by their marital status, but single people are kind of just left behind, you know? Like we celebrate the wedding. We don't celebrate someone buying a house at 21 who's like in the UK, which is currently really hard to do. And so I do think there is also a push from the culture at times to do something or step into something
just
that
if we tick box kind of thing. It's like this is your next step. That's how you get people who are filling out these steps that they have been told is going to be this transcendent, amazing experience that will answer so many questions for you. And then they get into it and it's just like, actually, this isn't all that it was cracked up to be. It's very underwhelming. And it's all of these empty promises that religion kind of makes that just rub me the wrong way, because like you're setting people up with this expectation. You're not giving them even the space to question it.
Both what you're saying, what I hear is a desire to reform. I'm not here to agree that the way that church has been done, the way that certain things have been pushed has been the right way. Oftentimes throughout faith, you would have a church council that would be like, okay, what does marriage mean now? In a world where people are more independent, they reevaluate certain traditions and say, okay, how do we approach it? And I think on a broad spectrum, the church lacks that counsel of like, okay, how do we speak about these things now? Now, in marriage now, I've been married coming up to 10 years. It's not easy. It's not easy. First few years, it was a shock. And, you know, I have seen some of my single friends left out because in the church context, you know, marriage is pushed for intentions that are good. But I think we need to revise the conversation. How do we create community where we now identify and speak to the singles? We speak to those who hold intention around their identity.
Do you think the church is doing a good job of doing that, like coming with the times and looking at new gender roles and looking at love and partnership in today's day and age?
I think some approaches need to be revised. Obviously, there's fundamentals that, based on just what the fundamentals are, we cannot change. But if we're going to be relevant, if we're going to provide space for people and reach and allow people to discover or explore God or faith, then we need to definitely change the way we approach and hold space for that. It can't be like, oh, just pray about it. You know, we have to learn how to have intelligible conversations.
I think all of these things, you know, talking about the church as a more historical entity. The church has been responsible for so many atrocities, whether you are religious or not, whether you belong to a religious doctrine or not. Humans are capable of great good and great wrong. A lot of the rights and things that we have today, the church was against. The church had to be convinced to entitle people to their humanity. Women were being burned alive. The Salem witch trials, the church used the demonization of independent women as a vehicle to enact such heinous crimes. That is what religion has a habit of doing.
Is that the church and religion, or is that people?
That's a
You
good
can,
question.
No, I don't think it's a good
No,
question.
no. It has to be a good question because you can't negate people who've had good experiences by finding faith. I see religion as a man-made structure and a man-made dogma that has pushed and promoted certain ideologies. When you're coming talking about God, I don't see it as a religion. I see it as a relationship provided in a context of a community. So religion has its bad rep because it is, when we think about religion, we think about do not do this, do not do that. We think about you are evil, you are bad. But when we talk about relationship, it's more nuanced.
So does that mean the 10 Commandments aren't relevant because it's about relationship and personal relationship with God?
No, the 10 Commandments are always relevant.
Oh, okay, interesting.
They're always.
Yeah, categorically disagree.
That's fine, that's what we're here for.
The reason I asked that question was because you said it's not about the do's and don'ts, and I thought, oh, this reminds me of something.
Yeah, no, why I say that, Jesus came, all right, and he said, you have heard, thou shalt not kill. But I say, if you think of killing your brother in your heart, that's the same of committing murder. So he now takes the behavior where the Old Testament was like, okay, it was law, and it proved, right? If you read everything you're reading in the Bible, the killings in the Old Testament, you're like, what is going on? It's because mankind cannot fulfill the law. But yet God had to give us the law in order to understand what was right and what was evil.
These commandments are very, quite literally set in stone, right? Very rigid. They do not account or contextualize society. Sometimes in order to survive, you need to lie. You cannot tell me that someone who is impoverished, someone who doesn't know when they're next going to be able to eat is wrong and a thief for stealing, for taking food to feed themselves. That to me is not theft. That to me is not breaking any commandment.
So
that to me is survival.
You have to weigh these things, all right? If someone steals because they're hungry, right? The way you deal with them rather than someone who just steals is different because their motivation, obviously, as you said, is survival, it's dignity. And so if I was someone who was in like a lawyer or court, I would see the situation. I'd be like, your motivation was hunger, your motivation was survival. It's still wrong to steal. We can't say that is right, but your motivation, that's why, as we're saying, is nuance. You have to understand intentions.
I don't think that stealing is inherently wrong because I understand that nuance supersedes any sense of rigidity in it. I think social intelligence is something that is very, very important. And if these commandments, they're set in stone, they're rigid, but there's so many asterisks. Thou shalt not steal, asterisk, unless you are impoverished, unless you are this, unless blah, blah, blah. And so what is the point of having it there as this rigid law then, if there needs to be so many accommodations to the reality of people's lived experiences?
But how do you reconcile that if morality is an individual, a self-governed, I choose what is moral? How do you govern that in a society where we have to relate with each other?
Social contracts. We have humans, we develop in community, in society. As we went from, the individual family to then building structures that accommodated more and more people, societies were created, larger civilizations were created. And because humans are social creatures, we understand that we benefit more from each other when we are respectful of each other, when we are considerate of each other, than when we are not.
For me, I think I like the idea of it being a framework because under the social, not the laws we have in society, having a framework within your own household with the people you're in a relationship with, so you can add the nuance, so you can expand on it, I think that provides a level of safety. And I think that's why it's so individual, because it has to be done in the context of community as opposed to a brushstroke for everyone. Because you're right, Scripture expands on the 10 Commandments, but Jesus was doing that with people he would be in community with, right? In a town that he was probably in, all his disciples would come back and frequent in. I see the benefits that religion has had. I think it would be unfair to say it's only been negative. However, I think we can expand on certain things.
Do you feel like people get married or get baptized, all these things for a show of success then?
I don't know if it has to be success. I'll be honest, when I get married, it will be a big party because I want one. That's it. It's not to show success. It's not. I just want a big party. Although I do think the messaging by society at times around things like marriage is communicating to people, this is how you have a successful life, and that I have an issue with.
It's not just that it's communicated to people, because the way men and women are socialized are completely different. Marriage is something that is pushed onto women in a way that isn't pushed onto men. I had a friend of mine tell me about a girl's trip that she wanted to plan to Mexico with one of her friends. And the friend said, oh, babe, I can't go because I want to experience it with my future husband. These are the kind of mindsets that so many young girls are socialized into having. They hold back on so many experiences that they want to have for themselves. It facilitates that kind of thinking because girls are socialized to seeing marriage as the biggest day of their life. If I do decide that I want to get married, it still will not be the biggest day of my life. The purpose of my life is for me to live it and for me to enjoy it and for me to discover myself outside of what I'm being told.
Even within manhood, right, there comes a point where there's now podcasts of men who just talk about their coming of age and they've partied, they've lived life, they've got the money, and they speak to them, they're just having an open conversation and speaking like, one thing I haven't done is married. I wonder what marriage would feel like.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that the way marriage is made to be prioritized by women and young girls is not how it's not the case for men. You just said, oh yeah, I've lived, I've partied, I've done this, maybe now it's time for marriage. Young girls are socialized to prioritize and think about marriage from when they are girls.
I think regardless of gender, when I'm working with people, I want them to unpack why they want something.
Yeah.
Because I think that is what will actually lead to success in whatever way he meant. Like if you think that marriage is a thing you want because you feel like you've lived your life, you now want to settle down and that's success to you, great. But for some people, they've been told that marriage has to happen.
Yeah. And that to put their life on hold until.
So for me, my biggest thing, regardless of how people want to do marriage, because I do think in this society, there has been progression. I think it would be unfair to say there hasn't been, but I think people need to unpick the why underneath it. Because there are people who have framed their life around negative influences, whether it's a parent who was narcissistic, who's told them, you will never be worth anything until you marry. You know, like that sort of core belief. I work with so many people where that is ingrained in them. And so for me, we need to unpick this belief that was like sewed into you.
You've got to separate what is cultural. And some things that are cultural can even be cultural Christianity.
Okay.
That the way that a Christianity is done in maybe Africa is not done in North America. So
Right.
every context of where Christianity or culture is emerging from will have its own distinct, oh, you do this or you do that. And it's not the same everywhere.
Yeah, and I agree with you. However, for me, still, I would encourage anyone in a moment of self-reflection of why is this what I am prioritizing?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't mean you're going to deconstruct it and let it go.
There's more nuance to people's desires of these things. My hesitation is that with religion, it often comes from a point of control and living out,
What's that controlling looking like?
telling people what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and telling them that their life is the way that they are living their life in this particular way is the wrong way to live it.
But if someone prescribes to a faith and prescribes to a certain, let's call it framework, isn't it the pastor's job to reinforce, like, this is how we enter into marriage as a Christian. The way we enter into marriage as a Christian won't be the same as we enter it if we were of a different faith. Isn't that the community guideline that, we promote what we believe in?
Do you feel like you can have a loving, meaningful life without Christ?
I don't think being married is the symbol of success. Fulfilling your purpose is the symbol of success. You are created for a reason, and you have a legacy to leave. And I think the most important legacy to leave is, did you live by love? Did you live by integrity? Did you do good in the world? And above all, did you have a relationship with your Creator?
You shaked your head there. Do you feel like we don't have a purpose?
It's not that we don't have a purpose. I think it would be very, how oversimplistic to say that there's one one purpose to life. Earlier, when you were talking about, you know, before you became a pastor and a Christian, you always dabbled in a different kind of belief. Have you ever thought about not believing in anything?
Everyone believes in everything.
But like,
I think
everyone believes
everyone has a belief
in something.
Like, even the way you're speaking, right? I wanted to ask you, right? The way you're speaking, it's basically not atheism. It's I don't know what the right word is, but you are the God. That's what it sounded like. It doesn't sound like atheism.
I don't need to deify myself in order to.
No, it's not like, deifying. You're self-governing and you're self-determining, and you
as
choose.
We all are. I think we all relinquish different levels of.
Yeah, but when you have faith in God, you kind of submit to a subscription of ideas and thoughts that you believe were inspired by this God. But when you are not that, and you're an atheist, you don't believe in anything.
Being atheist doesn't mean I don't believe in anything. I just don't believe in one more God than you do. Like, that's all it is.
If you lived in isolation, I would say, yes, she's made herself her own God, because there's no community.
No other reference,
yeah, there's no
other than my
person
imagination.
To bounce back. Yes, exactly. Because I think the rules for life, or the framework we operate in religion, I think people still find that in other communities. And I think that can mean that they are not putting themselves on that idol. I think it can still be a balanced life. I find it really hard when Christians say, well, you're an idol to yourself if you're an atheist. Because I've also worked with enough people who really aren't idolizing themselves, but they're also not idolizing God. They're kind of just in this middle ground of figuring out, does anyone have to take that place, or does everyone take that place? You know, it doesn't have to be a one person.
Nature is not, you know, a binary thing. Nature is. It's about survival, it's about evolution, it's about development, it's about adapting to your environment and changing. For example, we have literally witnessed the change in a species from a wild creature to a more docile and domesticated being. That is a process of evolution. That's how we have, you know, like cats and all these things and all these different breeds. We literally see the change in a species over time. We can observe these things.
But that's an animal. We're not created.
So what are humans? Are we not part of the animal kingdom? Humans have literally
humans
evolved.
Humans are created in an image of God.
We're not. That's your belief.
What's your thoughts on community?
We need it to thrive, whether you believe in God or not. I feel like inside of human beings is the desire to connect, desire to relate, desire to be seen and heard. Now, if you bring it to a faith-based perspective, which I stand on, we see God not just as one person. He dwells in a community. If you read the Bible, it says, let us create man in our image. And even when Adam was created, God then said, Adam's not good for you to be alone. Here's Eve, so you can have a relationship, because he needed another person to relate to. So community in its essence is how we're wired. It's just how we are.
I agree. I think community is foundational for our humanity. I think as humans, we are community-based, like species, in a sense. And I think our hurt often happens in community, so our healing has to happen in community. And I think, unfortunately, for some, religion has been the place of hurt, and so outside of it is where healing comes. And for others, the outside space has been the place of hurt. And religion, Christianity, faith is the place that they find healing in community. And I hope in my life, I am in healthy communities and I can continue to love and care for those who I love and care about. And that is something I value personally. But again, I think people have different things that they might put on a pedestal, or they might have as a priority. For some it's money, for some it's love, for some it's marriage. It's all very different. And I don't know if I can honestly say that there is one way to live life. However, I do think for a religion, there has to be rules within a religion. So it doesn't shock me when any person of faith is like, well, I follow this rule, and this rule, because those rules are also in place, not just for your life and your betterment, because it's within the context of you forming a relationship with God. And I think that's why it's put in place, where for those who aren't also trying to form a relationship with God, I think there can be different meaning.
So we spoke about community, marriage, we spoke about the 10 Commandments. We've had an atheist affirmed in her beliefs. We've had someone who has faith but's also a psychotherapist, and we've had a Christian who's like reaffirmed in his beliefs and believes Jesus is the way. This has been a great conversation. That's been Walking a Bar. Thank you for watching the series. I hope you've enjoyed every episode. And if you want more content like this, make sure you like and subscribe to 48 TV.